Welcome to another edition of Danny's Hot Takes. Today we're going over the new Warhammer 40,000 9th edition rules. And specifically, we're going to be talking about some of the more advanced rules for the game. And this is going to include such things as stratagems, strategic reserves, and other important rules that you need to know in order to play the game. So we're going to start off with stratagems, as you can see here. Command points can also be spent during a battle to use stratagems. Players can always use the stratagems opposite. Many more stratagems can be found in codexes and other publications. So you'll have a list of stratagems that your army can use. And you're going to have to pay command points in order to use that stratagem. So you're going to have to use that carefully hoarded resource that you've had with command points and spend them to let your army do really cool stuff. Like probably some of the neater things in the game happen with the use of stratagems. So in order to use them, you got to pay that command point cost. You can't use the same stratagem more than once during the same phase. You can use... stratagems not used during a battle round are exempt from this limit. So if you have stratagems that are used before the game starts or at the start of the turn, but not in any one of the phases, you can use those as many times as you'd like. We're not going to talk about unbound armies. I'm going to pretend that those don't exist. If you want to play with a collection of models, you can agree with your opponent to let you use. No, you can't. Don't. You can agree with your opponent to use whatever stratagems you want. And you can have as many command points as you want, or whatever else you two decide on. That's what's important. As long as you're having fun, that's the whole goal. But the stratagems that we have here, we're going to go over really quick. We have a total of seven stratagems. I can count. So we start with the Commandery Rule. So the Commandery Rule is kind of one of the more ubiquitous stratagems in the game. So use this stratagem after you have made it to hit roll, a to wound roll, a damage roll, a saving throw, an advance roll, a charge roll, a psychic test, a deny the witch test, or if you've rolled the dice to determine the number of attacks made by a weapon. Reroll that dice or saving throw. So that's an important one that kind of lets you make sure that you can fix dice results to the result that you want. So it's a really, really powerful stratagem, really, really good. Remember that if a dice roll contains more than one dice, you have to reroll all of the dice for that particular dice roll when you reroll. The next stratagem we have is cut them down. So you use the stratagem when an enemy unit falls back from a unit that you have. You roll a d6 for each one of your units in engagement range of the enemy unit. And on the roll of a 6, the enemy unit will take a mortal wound. So you kind of cut them down as they're trying to flee from you. So that's a good way to do a couple of mortal wounds to an enemy unit that's running away from you, like cowards. Next, we have Desperate Breakout. So the Desperate Breakout costs 2 command points. So it's princely sum of 2 command points. You can see the command point cost is right up here in the upper right-hand side of every stratagem. That'll be listed in every stratagem that you see. It may not always be in the upper right-hand corner. Use the stratagem in your move phase. Select one unit from your army that has not been selected to move this phase, and which is in engagement range with at least one enemy unit. Roll a d6 for each model in that unit, and for each roll of one model in that unit of your choice is destroyed. So you roll a dice for each model in your unit. Any ones that you get, you lose a model. Assuming that the unit was not totally destroyed, you can now attempt to fall back, and you get to ignore the enemy models when you're moving. So normally you can't fall back over enemy models, but with Desperate Breakout, you are able to do that. So that is important. Any model that ends its fallback move within engagement range of an enemy unit is destroyed. So this is even if the enemy is totally wrapped up your unit with bodies, like they've surrounded you, you have no escape. You can use Desperate Breakout to try and get out. So even though you might die, it will give you the opportunity to maybe shoot at the enemy that you may not have the option to do. So Emergency Disembarkation is a 1 command point stratagem. So you use this when a transport model from your army is destroyed. All the units in there, let's see here. So you place the entire unit that was in the transport fully within 6 inches of the destroyed model. and then the model is removed from the battlefield. The model being the transport. You're not affected by the model's destroy result. And then you roll a d6 for each model in the unit, and on a 1 or a 2 instead of just a 1, a model from your unit that did the disembarkation is destroyed. So this kind of lets you get out of a transport that may have been totally surrounded by the enemy, and wherein you may not have been able to get out because there's too many enemy models around there. This lets you get out a little bit further, so that maybe you can escape. Maybe some of your models from your unit can escape and live to fight another day. Your models that do an emergency disembarkation can also not charge or heroically intervene on that particular turn. You can spend 1 command point to fire Overwatch, and as we went over in the charge section, firing Overwatch is not a rule that every single unit in your army gets, except for some armies. I'm looking at you, Tao. All right, so fire Overwatch lets you shoot Overwatch with a unit. That'll cost you the princely sum of 1 command point. Then you have counter offensive. So use this stratagem after an enemy unit has fought in the fight phase. Select one of your units to fight. So this comes into play when your opponent has charged with multiple units. And so after one of their units fights, you can spend 2 command points and fight with one of your units before his other charging unit might get to fight. So you might be able to do enough casualties to whittle them down, or just get a few swings in before you're overwhelmed by the enemy forces. So pretty useful one. And then finally, we have Insane Bravery. So Insane Bravery costs 2 command points. Use the stratagem in the morale phase for a unit in your army. The unit automatically passes the morale test. You're only allowed to use Insane Bravery once per game. So use it wisely. Because it potentially can keep like an important unit in the game where they won't have to take the attrition test that you would normally have if you lost a lot of models in the game. So those are the core stratagems that you get. So every army gets these stratagems plus other stratagems that are available in their codex. Specifically, if you take a faction pure detachment in your army, you'll have access to that army's stratagems. The next section we have is the Strategic Reserve section. So this lets you this is another way that you can utilize command points that's not via a stratagem. Now, these rules don't account for units that get to start the game. So what a Strategic Reserves is, a wise commander does not necessarily commit all of their troops to the attack, making sure to keep additional forces held in reserve to reinforce wavering battle lines or exploit a weakness in the enemies. So this lets you keep units off the table to come in later strategically, either on your side of the board or maybe even your opponent's side of the board if you wait enough turns in order to do so. So before the battle, you pay command points to put units in Strategic Reserve. So you'll look at the unit's power level, and then based on all of the units' combined power level that you wish to put in Strategic Reserve, you'll have to spend a number of command points in order to have them or allow them to be placed off the table into Strategic Reserve. So if you have a power level total of 1 through 9, it only costs 1, 10 to 19 is 2, 20 to 29 is 3, and so on and so forth. Every 10 power level, it costs an additional command point. Only Battle-Forged armies can use Strategic Reserves, so sorry open play armies, you're not going to be able to do this unless you build a totally Battle-Forged army in open play. And again, you're going to have to pay those command points in order to do so. So when you arrive from Strategic Reserves, you arrive in the movement phase, and they can't arrive in the very first turn. You're going to have to wait until the second turn or later on. So Strategic Reserves, when they actually get placed, Battle Round 1, obviously, you can't put any of them out. Battle Round 2, you can put them within 6 inches of any battlefield edge, but not on the enemy's battlefield edge or in the enemy's deployment zone. Battle Round 3 or more, you can place them anywhere within 6 inches of the battlefield edge, but not on the enemy's battlefield edge. So anywhere on the table, even in their deployment zone, which is nice. When you do arrive from Strategic Reserve, you do count as moving. And you can't do additional normal movements, advances, or fallbacks. And remember, during the movement phase, this happens after all of your models have moved. But there are certain abilities in the game that let you move again during the psychic phase or during the shooting phase or other areas. Any Strategic Reserve unit that's not set up by the end of the battlefield will count as destroyed. So aircraft, when they arrive from Strategic Reserve, and this will happen more often, aircraft, when they arrive from Strategic Reserve, can be placed anywhere on the battlefield that's more than 9 inches away from any enemy models. So it'll really let them get into advantageous spots so that they can do their shooting. And any aircraft that flies off the table will go back in Strategic Reserve, so they'll come back in on your next turn. So if they fly off the table, on the next turn, they'll come back in anywhere on the table within 9 inches, and then they can do their normal moves and everything else. But if they're flying off the table, they're also not doing anything. So you want to make sure that you're flying into advantageous places where you can really get the most bang for your buck from your aircraft. The final section that I wanted to talk about in the advanced rules section here is the actions. So actions are used during missions in order to complete mission objectives. The actions, in a lot of ways, will help you to win the game depending on what the mission objectives are. So if you want a unit to perform, and just as a description, occasionally defeating the enemy through skill at arms isn't enough. And your warriors must accomplish some vital battlefield tasks to secure victory, from searching for missing archaeotech or activating a series of power generators to completing a blasphemous ritual to the dark gods. These tasks are many and varied. So you can select a unit to perform an action. The action itself will tell you exactly when you perform the action, and it'll tell you when the action is completed. Sometimes it's immediately, sometimes it takes a whole turn to do, stuff like that. A unit can't perform an action when it's in engagement range of enemy units. They can't perform an action if they advanced or fell back. Aircraft and fortifications can't perform actions, which does make kind of sense. I really wouldn't want my bunker to try and hack an enemy computer system or something like that. Characters cannot use aura abilities, and aura abilities are usually very powerful while they're performing actions. So they can't support your army or tell people where to shoot or anything like that. So that's a really big downside for using a character to perform an action. And an action is failed if the unit is destroyed or if it makes a normal move, advances, falls back, manifests a psychic power, shoots, charges, or performs a heroic intervention. That's really harsh. So make sure your unit is safe when it's performing an action, or give your opponent something better to do. And don't shoot with them after you've decided to make an action. That's probably a pretty bad idea. There are normal actions, and then there are also psychic actions. So if you want your psyker to kind of read the minds of enemy generals, or if you want them to perform a ritual, they can take a psychic action. So just like manifesting a psychic power, a psychic action will have a warp charge value that you have to do, and the psyker will have to not do any psychic powers in order to actually utilize that action. If they succeed on the psychic test that they take, then the action is completed. You can't do any other psychic actions. A double 1 or a double 6, you're going to take Perils of the Warp just like a normal psychic action. And unlike normal actions, your opponent can try and deny the witch to cancel the psychic action. So you have to make really sure that your units are going to succeed, or you can roll really high on your psychic test in order to make sure that action succeeds, or your opponent can deny you and kind of cancel out your psychic action. So that goes over all of the advanced rules. Stay tuned for more mob rules reviews.